Well, shame on us. We're talking about shame. We're all in the shame boat. I mean, this has really got a lot of potential.
Shame on us. We're supposed to be talking about this, right?
I don't know. I'm just looking for some opening lines. But my name is Dan Burrell. I'm one of the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship, and you're listening to Life Talks today. And we have a special guest with us in our studio. Along with me, first of all, is our executive producer, Josh Brom, who's the founder and president of the Equal Rights Institute. And we have Mike Kozlinski, who is our resident partner counselor at Life Fellowship, who brings an important approach to discipleship through biblical counseling that has been a blessing to this church for over a decade now. And on top of that, he's just one of those guys I love talking to because he always makes me smarter when I do. Not long ago, he actually offered to talk at one of our men's events, and then he and I were talking about it later on the topic of shame. And I said, you know what? This is something that belongs on Life Talks. And so we started with last episode. If you didn't get to listen to it, go back and listen to that one, then join this one, because we were talking about the power, the destructiveness, and kind of the core of what shame is about, and how we ought to define it, how we identify it in our lives. Today, we're going to talk about how you handle it, or maybe even how we mishandle it. So, Mike, welcome back to Life Talks. We're glad to have you here. And we want to kind of like bring us back onto the on-ramp, so to speak, here with our topic.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Glad to be here. So as an introduction, we discussed last time around the difference between guilt and shame. So guilt is when we do wrong and we get due punishment for that. So there's a behavior emphasis. Shame is more about being wrong and having a social cost, a social standing change, being thought of higher or lower in light of it. And so when it comes to what's wrong with me, there's two elements. There's the sinful side. When I do wrong, that reveals what's wrong with me in a moral sense. And what's broken about me is what's wrong with me in a non-moral sense. And so whenever I feel my own inadequacies, my own shortcomings, my own, difficulties, there's a level of like, well, I don't want people to see it, right? They might think lesser of me. Or people do treat me badly. Well, why do they treat me that way? What's wrong with me? So like there's an interplay between social interaction, social inclusion or exclusion, and how I understand myself as a person. And so there's a connection between what's good or bad about me and how people are responding to me. So that's the core of shame. All
right. So, you've kind of set us up to where we're going to be discussing mishandling our shame. That brings up a lot of questions. Help us work through those just by sheer, how do we approach it? What's going on when we talk about mishandling shame?
Sure. And so I think it's important to recognize is why the title of We Are All in the Shame Boat is that we are all broken people. Right, so none of us is perfect. None of us is whole. None of us is as we should be. And because we are sinners, and we're also fallen in that broken, more like rest of non-moral sense, we have to. It's true for all of us, and so therefore we recognize within ourselves that it's there, and therefore we have certain default tendencies to hide it or mishandle or to some ways of try to avoid the cost of it. So I have four of which ways that we tend to do that. The first one I've already referenced is to hide it. All right, we basically pretend that it's not there. And so this is where usually the first place people go is just to ignore it or to try to hide it from other people. And so I reference Genesis 3 because that's where A, shame originated, and B, you see that as the first response. So with Adam and Eve, they're in the garden and they eat of the fruit. And the first thing they notice is that they're naked and ashamed, because before they were naked and not ashamed. And so then when God, is kind of like out there, interacting, he says, "Where are you?" And like, well, they're hiding. They're hiding behind the fig leaves. They're hiding behind the bushes, the trees, or whatever. And he's like, "Well, what are you doing?" "Well, we're hiding." "Well, why?" "Because, you're naked." "Well, who told you were naked?" Like, so that element of hiding, okay, is our first kind of wrong way to handle our shame. And so, and that's, again, not only true in Genesis, it's true today. Again, people, when they host events, they will tend to clean their house, right? That's the first part. And secondly, if there's a room they don't quite get to or need to throw everything, they'll have like a room that's just like...
You mean
never.
Like putting the dirty dishes in the oven? I'm just asking for a friend.
Right, exactly. Wow. Exactly. So you have like the room that collects all the stuff.
Yes.
And that door just stays closed.
And then in my case, we can't even open it because the stuff is collapsed on it.
Exactly. So we have the forbidden room, right? That holds all the stuff.
Sometimes referred to as a garage.
or a shed or the attic.
Or all of the above.
Oven.
Right. Yeah, the oven. That's a great one. So basically, because we want our guests not to see our mess.
Yeah.
Right. And so therefore, we're going to have the presentable part of the house and the unpresentable part of the house, and the door stays closed and possibly locked. And so like that's one way. People have a classic expression like "fake it until you make it." Oh, you're in this position, and like I don't really feel like I belong here, but I'm going to pretend I do. So you won't see my inadequacy in this job. It's interesting, although I think in a very nefarious way. Like, why is there an incognito mode on internet? Like when it comes to having that browser, well, the only reason you would have something that's intentionally hidden if you're trying to hide something, right? And so, or deleting the history. Like, there's things that people have that are oriented to keep from being found out their sin and shame. And so it's easy to tell lies, but I mean, people are liars. And so like, it's so common today, it's almost comical. But why do people lie? Well, they have something that they're wanting to keep from being exposed, something that they're wanting to keep hidden, and just telling something that isn't true is a very clever, effective way to do that. So we have this tendency of hiding our shame. And so that's something that any of us can be tempted to do. The second thing is to excuse it. And so when it comes to excusing our shame, it's like, well, yeah, this is there, but it's not my fault. All right. And so basically we try to blame shift. All right. And that's also what you see in the Genesis passage. So in the Genesis passage, you see as Adam is being confronted by God for what he did, he looks to Eve and Eve looks to the serpent. And so it's like, don't look at me, look at them, And so, gosh, like, I know we have to kind of be careful with this topic, but like politically, whataboutism, like,
Oh, yeah.
it is sticking everywhere. Well, it doesn't matter what we did, look what they did, And so it's so quick, so reflexive, let me tell you why. Well, if it wasn't for this or wasn't for that, And so we're really good at blame shifting. We're really good at telling you like, yeah, this is real, but it's not my fault. In our therapeutic age, which has some good things about it, but also a lot of criticisms that I have of it, but people tend to, again, it's reflexive. They blame their parents, they blame their upbringing, their culture, their genes, their friends. Like, it's always everyone else's fault. And not that these things don't have any influence. They certainly influence. Our parents influence us significantly. Our social environment influences us significantly. But people abdicate their responsibility. Oh, because this happened to me, therefore, it's therefore somehow not my fault for what I do. And so it's very easy to shift blame everywhere else rather than being accountable for our own decisions. The third one is to deflect in the sense of looking at what is right instead of what is wrong. So I call it pride in strengths. Okay, well, yeah, I can acknowledge my weakness, but hey, let me look at my strengths over here, So it's kind of like ignore the man behind the curtain. Let's look at the great, powerful Oz. Like there's I'm going to focus on this thing, as opposed to that thing. And so when it comes to, because we all have things that are right with us too, we're made in God's image and God has given us gifts. And so we can try to highlight that which is good about us. As opposed to acknowledge what is wrong about us. And there's a really important distinction between pride and honor, okay? Because the opposite of shame is honor, all right? And so if we use our gifts correctly, so the best example I can think of off the top of my head is like Maximus from Gladiator.
Nice. Have you seen Gladiator?
I have seen both of them.
Okay. So in Gladiator, Maximus, despite obviously being socially rejected by Commodus, and he now ends up as a gladiator. His mantra to his soldiers and then to his other gladiators is strength and honor. Yep. And just by virtue of being strong and honorable, he ends up being in a position to now get his revenge with Commodus. And so he didn't have to grandstand. He didn't have to try to put on some kind of show. He just was that. Okay. So honor is when we just have the right utilization of our strengths. That's a good thing. But pride is when we're like, no, let me exalt, let me exploit, let me try to highlight. And that's where that grandstanding piece comes in. And so people will try to overinflate their strengths and make it all about, look how great I am, look how good I am. And that's what kind of drives like celebrity culture. Celebrity culture is when we see somebody else and look how great they are and how good of a speaker they are, or, whatever the athleticism or whatever the industry is. And we will like honor and like elevate this person, And so as a result, they become without criticism and we can't confront them. And so we have this element of treating people as if they're somehow superior, you know? And as a result, like that's a function of our shame, but also reinforces their pride. And the fourth one is glory and shame. And this is one, and I think it's one of the most like destructive elements of it, is when you acknowledge your shame is real, but rather than acknowledging that it's bad, it's actually glorious. It's actually wonderful. It's actually good. And again, the clearest example of that today is when it comes to the LGBT movement. Like we are actually in Pride Month right now, right? And that's why the whole thing of like being in the closet, like that's hiding, right? I'm hiding my same-sex attraction, you know? Well, now people are going to be parading in the streets, right? Waving the flag, dressed and doing, you know, talk about terrible things. And so like, but there's a level of like, we're going to glory in our shame, you know? Same thing with shouting abortions. You know, like, hey, not only did I acknowledge that I had one, but I'm going to celebrate it. I'm going to trumpet it. You know, people back in college, oh man, I got so wasted. You know, like they talk about how much drugs they did or how much alcohol they drank. You know, people today talking about their body counts. You know, like, hey, this is how many people I've slept with, and they're glorying in their shame, like how many people I've been involved with. And so, like, we're taking what is sinful, what is wrong, that is destructive, and now I'm going to turn it into something I'm bragging about, something I'm glorying in.
Is there progression through these? Like, because it never really addresses the shame, do we start at number 1 and do we end up at number 4? Is that a possibility? Or do we try them all out in rapid succession? Where are we at as a culture on this?
Yeah, great question. I wish I had a better answer for you than I do. I think that the fourth one, I think in any individual or group or culture, it has to be the end of the line is, right? We have to actually take that which is bad and make it as if it's good, right? The whole calling light darkness and darkness light kind of idea, and basically turning nature on its head.
Which is warned about in Romans.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah. Romans 1 is a excellent description of that. Obviously, it's
where you end up celebrating the exact opposite of what you should be celebrating.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so people, you know, will celebrate their hatred of God and celebrate their you know, personal worship of self. And so yeah, that is, I think, where it ends up. I think any of the other three, though, could probably be more interchangeable. Hiding, I think, is just usually most people's reflective thing. Excusing it, deflecting, you know, that's pretty common too. Focusing on our strengths. I mean, I think that's where I actually didn't cover it, but in my outline, like there's Paul talking about his resume, you know, and how, hey, I could have like bragged about because I'm a Jew of all Jews and like this is my resume, but compared to Christ, it's nothing. And so, but you have that resume giving. I think those three are, I would say, more standard, and the fourth one is only when you've like walked things through to their natural conclusion. Then that's probably, you know, about once you end up upside down, that's what it's going to probably as bad as it's going to get.
Yeah. As we kind of, I want to make sure we spend enough time just helping us identify that, because I think, you know, by nature we're truth suppressors, which, you know, sometimes shame is based on a truth that is inconvenient, or it may be a truth that is accurate based on a sin, and so we deflect, we defer, we justify, we rationalize, we do these things as part of our own journey. Dealing with shame biblically and in a way that has productive end results, is there an importance on our part to be able to even see our behavior in one of these 4 categories or other categories ourselves, and to start acknowledging it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, in some ways, like in a lot of ways, like in the Christian faith is about saving, right? So like we're all born, to go back to Romans 1, like we're born into sin. And therefore, we're all on the wrong path to begin with. And so as a result, that's our kind of like initial state once we become, you know, like self-aware. Like, so we're already sinners. We're already, you know, mishandling things and then mishandling what we're mishandling. Like, so our ability to sin, and that's why when it comes to repentance, you know, okay, I'm going to turn from and then turn towards. So on the turning from side, right, we have to acknowledge, that's what confession is. I agree with God that this is not okay. This is not the way that it should be. So self-awareness, accountability, you know, owning, this is my issue, you know, and recognizing that there is a way that I need to stop being, and then recognize the way to start being. So the start being is kind of like the redemptive path, you know, beginning to move in the right direction. But we have to acknowledge, that we're down the wrong path. You know, was it C.S. Lewis that said that the surest way forward is once you're on the wrong path is to turn around rather than keep going. And so I do think, and this is where, because we're in a humanistic culture, and people, I think we're rapidly becoming an immoral culture in the sense that people, at the least don't see righteousness as something worthwhile pursuing, you know, but again, almost doubling down on, well, what is the wrong I can do for the good it can do? The whole doing evil for good results. And as a result, morality is seen to be largely optional, unless we're talking to our opponents. But within ourselves, having self-awareness, having humility, having accountability, willing to confess our sin and brokenness, and willing to recognize, hey, you know what, I need help, you know, and that's why we're ultimately we need Jesus, you know, and then we need his people. If so, there's a confession that I think goes alongside repentance, when done correctly, is very, very badly needed. And I think for us to acknowledge our need for that, and then not only in a generic sense, but in a very specific sense, you know, is going to be really key for things to turn around.
All right. So you've been dealing with largely, as we've dealt with the topic today, with shame that comes as a result of failures, sin.
Moral version, yeah.
Yeah. But as we began with our preliminary definitions, you gave personal acknowledgement to shame that comes that's outside of our control. I mean, you had big ears or whatever you characterize it. I got a big nose. All right. You were skinny. I mean, you could see through me if I stood in front of a window when I was growing up. I mean, it was constant, just constant.
Sure.
And because of that, I know what it was like to get picked last at when they were trying out for football and at the intramural leagues or whatever, because I was so lightweight. That wasn't my fault.
Right.
I wasn't in control of that.
Sure.
How do we end up mishandling our shame that's out of our control? It's different than struggling with same-sex attraction or an addiction or a momentary lapse of character that pains somebody. How do we deal with the kind that comes toward us and it really has been out of our control to some extent?
Yeah, so great question. So I do think that there is a distinction between what we have control over and what we don't have control over. For instance, my height, right? It's not like I can get those.
The Bible says who can add a cubit, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we can't change that, and I don't think we even necessarily quote unquote should. That said, there are, when it comes to our brokennesses, and it's easy to focus on on the medical side. For instance, when I had cancer, year and a half ago, that was treated. I needed to try to overcome cancer. And so when it comes to, you're wearing eyeglasses, so that's a kind of brokenness that your eyes are not working as they should be. And so we have restorative mechanisms we can utilize to overcome and restore and repair things. And so at some point I'm going to need to have a knee replacement surgery. My left knee's not in great shape because of no cartilage. So therefore that's not a sin issue, right? But my body's breaking, and therefore we want to provide some level of healing, restoration. So when it comes to those things, there are certain things that are quote unquote just the way I am, but they're appropriate, like height, But there are other things that aren't the way I should be, and therefore I want to get that fixed to the extent I have the power to fix it. Like knee surgery or chemo for cancer. So that's how we distinguish between brokennesses that are real brokennesses versus those that are only socially, we're not picking you for kickball. Well, that's not I don't have to. I don't no more obligation to be good at kickball, right? Therefore, I don't have to try to overcome that. Not that it's wrong to get better at kickball, but that's not a prescriptive thing.
Yeah, I want to chase this rabbit a little bit further down the rabbit hole. We've got a couple of minutes left in our so I can't help myself.
Nice.
So
sure.
Is there a limit to how we should address non-charactered issues? For instance, would it be wrong for someone who has a lump on their nose or whatever to get plastic surgery to repair that? Is it wrong for someone to get gastric bypass just simply because they want to look thinner, not necessarily because of health reasons, but they just want to be more physically attractive? You can take that. Is it wrong to dye your hair? Is it wrong to, you can take anything to tattoos. Yeah. There's just all different kinds of things we can go. Are there any general principles, or do we have to dig deeper and look at our own motivation for why we're doing what we're doing? Or should it just be, hey, this is the way God created me, I'm going to be okay with it? Yeah,
so I think it's a little bit of all of those.
That's not helpful.
So because each one taking his own turn, right? So the height issue, I already they had that one. So I think it's acceptable, if someone has the bump on their nose, right, to just let that be there. I don't think there's anything prescriptive around that. And so you gave another example. I'm trying to remember what that one was.
Gastric bypass surgery.
Gastric
was
bypass.
the second one, yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, like there is the goes back to what I do, how I do it, why I do it. So even if my desire is vanity, for why I might get the gastric bypass surgery, I still think it's probably overall better to do the traditional way of like diet and exercise to get in better health. Is that by itself wrong? I wouldn't say so, because getting in physical health is better for you. Like you're more apt to live a better life, healthy life, more strength-based life along that, using that as an option. So I do think that's partly a what and a how, all right, but the why can still be navigated. So I encourage people to do what is right, even if your motive isn't pure, but also work on your motive. If we only wait till our motives are pure to do what is right, like when will we ever do it? So it's easy to justify bad decision making on the basis of impure motives. And so we should always do what is right, and then also then work on our motives.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you answered it that way, because I think that's one of the important things for us as we grow in our Christian faith and as we become more mature and we're working at our salvation, right? The more you know, the more responsibility you have for how you apply it. And sometimes we love to live the legalistic life that says, just tell me yes or no, right or wrong, good or bad. We want everything to be just really clean. There are grays. And in order to determine whether a gray area is something that we should be involved in or whatever, really does require us to look inwardly and to look upwardly. That we're asking, am I doing this so that I'll be more sexually attractive? Or am I doing this because I'm not willing to accept how God has worked his creation out in my life? Or is it a matter of, this is really distracting. It's distracting to everybody around me, and it's distracting me, and I need to address it. Or this could cause me a health ramification in the future. But we can't just be satisfied with addressing every imperfection with a snap urge or I can feel better. I can solve this problem with a little bit of surgery, a little bit of money, a little bit of this or that.
Sure.
And I think that's part of growing in discipleship, is that we were willing to ask those tough questions. Am I right?
Yeah, I have a metric I use that I think is hopefully helpful, especially when it comes to this kind of part of the discussion. So I think there's 3 levels of evaluation. The first level of evaluation is righteousness. So we're to always do what is right and always resist what is wrong. And so if I do give in to what is wrong, I need to repent. Okay, we got to move away from that. But that's always the orientation: pursue righteousness and resist sin. The second level of evaluation is more challenging, but also very, very important, which is wisdom versus foolishness. And wisdom is more like, how do I see things God's way? And it's not written black and white in chapter and verse, but there are wiser ways and more foolish ways of approaching things, both how, and why. And so wisdom takes a lot of work, all right, a lot of thought, a lot of deliberation, a lot of prayer, a lot of deliberation with other godly people to develop wisdom. And wisdom's really key, distinguish godly wisdom versus worldly wisdom. Because godly wisdom, okay, how do I abide God's principles, God's ways, God's priorities, God's agenda, and do it his way, as opposed to, what is the easy, simple, effective way, effective in a purely pragmatic sense, to get to the desired end. And so worldliness doesn't take God into consideration. It's only about ends justifying means. So that's the second level. That's harder. There's a lot of gray area in it, but doesn't mean that there's no guidance or direction in it. Gray doesn't mean anything goes. Gray means I have to think more deeply and consider more considerations around it. All right. So once you've worked through righteousness and you work through wisdom, anything else I think does fall under preference. So like, hey, I'm allowed to have, like for me, like I'm doing keto right now because I'm trying to get in better physical health myself. Okay. Well, I can't eat bread. Okay. Now that's technically not sinful, but like, from a wise standpoint, that's right out. All right. But when it comes to eating chicken or fish, both of those are in for me. Okay. Well, which one do I feel like? Because it's wise for either one's a good option, right? That I can go off a preference for that. So we work through from righteousness to wisdom and from wisdom to preference. And so, but usually today people work off of preference as if that's everything or the only thing, And so, no, it falls third in line behind righteousness and behind wisdom.
Yep. I hope you all have notes with you and a pen, because there was just so much in that needed to be written down. That was awesome, and we're out of time for this episode. But I hope that you'll maybe go back and listen to this one again, because it had so much rich content. And ask yourself: am I mishandling the shame that I have? Am I dealing with the shame that is a result of sin, a result of living apart from God's truth? And then also, am I dealing with the shame issues that come because of societal pressures or because of physical imperfections? And am I dealing with those in wisdom? and in pursuit of righteousness. So great stuff, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing this. I'm so glad we're talking about this topic. And I want you all folks that listening at home to join us, if you would, for our third episode where we're going to be talking about how to rightly handle shame and how to address this biblically, and hopefully for us to find healing and growth in the journey as we want to become more Christ-like and as we want to apply his word to our lives on a practical level as well. As always, it's just a pleasure having you join us for Life Talks. We hope that you'll tell your friends about us on your social media feed. You can always find us at Spotify and Apple iTunes and all kinds of different places. And when you do, take that link, if you would, and share it with somebody and let them know that maybe they might hear something on one of our over 600 episodes that might be a help to them. But as always, thanks for joining us here at Life Talks.